Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Live on Radio Gibraltar with me, Ros Astengo. On today's programme, we pick up the theme from last night's GBC Viewpoint programme about families who separate and the damaging and heartbreaking consequences of those who move out of the family home and become either homeless or who can only afford to stay in accommodation that's deemed not suitable for visiting children, in some cases leading to parental alienation and severe mental health issues as a result. Well, I am delighted to welcome the Minister for Housing back on the programme today, Stephen Linares, to tell us what he's doing to help those who are most in need of social housing. And he's also joined again by Action for Housing, Henry Pinna. Thank you both of you for joining me.
You've become quite
the double act on my programme. Minister Linares, we're talking about parental alienation this week, and you will have heard how damaging it can be. And one of the barriers I've been learning to single parents being able to sort of keep connected with their children is housing. I know that you know this coming from the Ministry for Housing. I'd like you to clear up some confusion, first of all, about the 665-bed hostel that's gone to the DPC for Planning Commission. I'm a bit confused because when it was first announced, the government said that it was temporary housing for those experiencing a sense of homelessness. And then Minister Bossano told GBC in an interview that the emphasis would be on workers. And he said single parents are currently in hostels that already exist. Okay, although anecdotally, many single parents will say those hostels aren't actually suitable. Can you clarify us? What is the purpose of this hostel? Who is it for?
Well, first of all, you are mistaken by saying that it is a government hostel. This is not a government hostel. This is done by a private entity who is going to build the hostel and be managed privately. What the government is interested in, obviously, is to try and put people like workers in it, and also people who, like you have just stated, people who have issues, social issues. But that will have to be a contract between the government when the housing, for example, need some accommodation, that we will negotiate with the private entity that runs the hostel. And that's why Mr. Bossano was saying that it's not the government that's building the hostel. The government is interested, very interested in having this hostel because it gives us a space to put in all our or people who might have problems.
How many beds then are you thinking of negotiating?
Well, look,
Any idea?
Okay, we tend to think that the issue is like, hundreds of parents wanting to have accommodation. It's very few and far between. The problem is not as acute as it seems or is wanting. People are saying. I mean, I didn't see the Viewpoint program, but I can understand because in my clinics, I have lots of parents who come to me and say, look, I want a house. I've been kicked out of my house, either the wife or the husband. I want to see my children. But this is a very alive thing. How do we give somebody who has just within a week is now out of the house and wants to see the children? Housing is a long-term issue,
but what people
not
are
a
looking,
short-term.
yes, but people are looking for short-term remedies.
And therefore, the hostel would be like a place where the person can go if they need, for example, if they're unemployed or the issues that they might have in not being able to afford paying for a hotel. You would have the hostel where the government can negotiate with the private entity and say, right, okay, if I have a problem, we do it now. But it's obviously very, very small. We do it with the Emil Hostel, or we do it sometimes.
But you'll acknowledge, Minister, that that is resolves one situation in which a parent that has left the house, and more often than not, it's the father, will have somewhere to stay, possibly, but it doesn't actually resolve the issue of parental alienation, because in these accommodations, you can't really have your children staying with you, can you?
And how do we expect then to accommodate a person who has left the wife or the husband for the housing stock? What do we have then? I think Henry would then hammer me, because if I have 20 flats and I give it to people who have problems, who have created or for different circumstances. I cannot, as a housing minister, have 20 or 30 flats available so that the parent can then live with their children. Anyway, there's court proceedings. There are the parent also has to have court orders. How long do the children are with different parents? Because you can get abusive parents that leave the home because they are abusive.
You do. You also get loving parents.
Absolutely,
Who are unable
absolutely.
To
I'm not saying they're all the same. But what I'm saying is, each and every individual case is different, and therefore, what we cannot have is a stock of houses waiting, because those houses would be empty then. What, do I put a parent who's just left the wife or the husband and give them a 2-bedroom flat so that they can see their children?
Let's bring Henry Pinna in. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it all boils down, as always, to lack of housing stock, which is endemic. I mean, I agree with the minister that the issue is very complex, and that at the drop of a hat you cannot allocate everyone who becomes a homeless issue. But again, it boils down to the endemic shortage of housing stock.
I don't agree with that.
I'd like to ask the minister, reference the hostel, whether it might be used as a pretext not to construct housing for rental, the much needed 1 RKBs and 2 RKBs, because it might well happen that the minister or the government, either now or in the future, will say, look, we've got so many hundreds of beds, so therefore there is no need for us to construct a housing for rental.
Minister.
So I'd like an answer to that, please.
Absolutely not.
Good.
That is a straight answer that I'm giving you here publicly. It's not for that. We are, and I don't agree that there is any endemic problem with the housing in Gibraltar.
But perhaps you should speak to the Parental Equality Group, because a lot of parents have problems accessing housing at affordable cost.
And I tell you, look, I said before the program that I have clinics every month, and I see people who come with their own problems. And one of the problems usually is this one, where a father or a mother is chucked out of the home. They want to have contact with their children, but it's a very much of an alive thing. I cannot, for example, allocate a flat to a man who has left his wife, who wants to see his children, if he hasn't got yet a court order whether he is allowed to see the children. So how do we work that out?
But once that court
order is issued, then that person goes up in points and is awarded points to be able to go up the list to be able to accommodate them.
Mr. Feetham said last night on Viewpoint that there are people on the list, the 1 RKB list or 2 RKB list, that have been there for many, many years. Is that true?
Well, I don't know.
He said since 2011. Is that true?
No, not since 2011. And if he has any, he can give it to me. And he knows that every time he's given me names, and I have dealt with it straight away.
Minister, on the question of the lack of housing, we shall be able to discuss this when we meet next week.
Yep.
I believe we have a meeting on the 8th. So shall I move on to another issue which was left pending when we last met?
Henry, if you don't mind, I'd just like to bring up 2 more points from Viewpoint.
Right,
and then we're going to go on to when we last met and pick up on all those issues. There were 2 things that did come out, Minister, that I'd like to ask you. If a father's name is on a housing deed when he moves out, he then can't get on the housing list unless he removes his name from the deeds to the property where perhaps the mother and the children are still staying. That is a barrier to him. Is there any...
Why is it a barrier to him?
Well, because he can't go on the housing list.
Yes, but once the deeds are separated, he can.
Okay, so...
It depends. It also depends whether the house is sold, because it's to do with, and I'm sure Henry will agree with me, that anybody who is a property owner should not be in a housing list.
No, but
so this is the issue.
Yeah, the issue I think is if the family home remains so as to give stability to the children that stay, that house is not going to be sold.
Right.
So then the issue remains that the name remains on the deeds
Well,
Unless he takes his name off and then relinquishes his right to that property.
Yeah.
yes. So what is the issue?
Well, is there not? Well, it's a barrier to them getting housing. So, which is why a lot of these people do
But
need
they are
some sort
homeowners.
of temporary. Yeah, but
So do we
they've moved
remove-
out of the property, though, haven't they?
Yes, they moved out of the property, but they're still the property owner. And therefore, by removing the name of in the deeds, they will have the right to go into the housing list. It's as simple as that.
Right. So they have to relinquish their ownership
Absolutely.
of the house.
Of course, because that is one of the main thing. I mean, anybody who's a property owner is not allowed to be in the housing list. Now, if the deeds say that the husband or the wife is a property owner in conjunction, all that they have to do is change the deeds. And what we have done is that if it's been processed, the deeds are being changed, and sometimes it takes time. The housing will say, okay, fine, I can see that you're going through the process. We might be able to put them into the housing list because we know that the deeds are going to be changed.
Yeah, it does put the parent that's moved out at a disadvantage.
Absolutely,
though,
but
doesn't
look, this is life. I mean, the parent is leaving the home, and we understand that there are each individual home is a new their own issue.
Okay, the other thing the parents brought up on the programme as well is the fact that if a father moves out and needs to get an affidavit signed, he needs to get an affidavit signed by the mother saying that they are separated in order to qualify for social housing. But the problem is if the mother then refuses to sign that again is another barrier. Can the father not just sign an affidavit saying that the relationship is over? Why is it dependent on the mother's goodwill in signing that document?
First and foremost, I think it's important that the courts do this. And I think if Danny said that Section 38, which he was talking about yesterday, about the alienation of the parent, I think that is parents, when they are separated, they need to, and I am all in agreement with what the Minister for Equality said, there has to be awareness, more awareness from what are your rights when you divorce or you separate? What are your rights? People they divorce, they separate, and they don't know their rights. And this is the problem, really, because once they know their rights, they can go and do an affidavit, they can go to the courts, get custody of the children, get a separation. Once you get the separation, legal separation.
Any plans to review that, though? I know that you're looking at
I know
reviewing the
that I know that Samantha is looking at all this,
Okay.
and I'm quite happy with what she is doing, and I'm quite happy with this to discuss this, how it affects the housing. So I'm quite open to discussing this.
Okay, Henry, let's bring you in.
Yeah, when we last met, Minister, we put it to you that single individuals find it very difficult to partake of the 50-50 schemes because preference is given to larger families, and that single people are not taken in. We have checked with GRP, and they said that this is so because of the criteria imposed by the government. Now, last time we met, you said you would be looking into it. Have you done so?
Yes, I have, and I am happy to say that the way in which the 583 flats that are being sold are being we have categorized by Cat 1s, who are the people who actually release a government house. The second one are partners, people who are together in partnership and have children in common, because I think it's important that there is a family unit. And like Henry's just said, the third usually, and it's not Cat 3, it's Cat 2A, it's within the Cat 2, is the single people. And I'm happy that there are enough flats, not enough for all of them. There are, even if I gave to all single, or I just tackled the single, we wouldn't get there because there are 580.
How many have been allocated? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I wouldn't know. But I you see, what I'm interested in is in sections. How many from the 500? If there are 100 and odd that are relinquishing households, that's 100 odd flats that we are going to get. If there are another 120 odd which are couples with children, that's another chunk. And the third chunk is the singles. Now, we got approximately 700 odd single people who want a house. We only got 583 anyway. So once we have given the 200 of the Cat 1s and the Cat 2s, I am quite happy that we have nearly 200 odd to give to single people. But there is not enough. Maybe we need in the future to do more affordable homes.
Henry,
because it's obvious that there is a take-up on this. And the people in Gibraltar do want affordable homes. And it also helps us to get back all the houses that are rented now.
Henry?
Because at the moment it seems as if the single people are being penalized for being single. And, you know, you say that a number of flats will be made available for single people, but still preference is being given to families and to couples. And as you said, possibly the way ahead would be to construct more flats for the singles.
Yes, maybe, yes. You're probably right there.
The other thing that we left pending last time was the question of the the 13 flats that you had earmarked for refurbishment for single homeless men. Now, there's also the question, well, first of all, we want to know whether these flats are already for allocation, and secondly, whether any of these flats might be made available for homeless women as well. Because remember that we also get women who become homeless. The halfway house is apparently full up.
We only have time for an answer from Minister now in reply to that.
Well,
Do you want to
the
tell us what's
simple
happening
answer
with
that
that?
Henry knows that we've met various times, and that the flats are now being occupied by people who have had
all of them. All 13
yes,
of them?
No. I told you that we were preparing 13.
Yeah.
And from the 13, we might have, I can't just get it off the cuff, but it's about 6 or 7 that we are already being, the people are in there.
Yeah, and the
They're
rest?
already being used. And the rest are online, because it's a live thing. It's not that we have 10 people, then you have 12, then you have 5, and it goes up and down.
Minister,
so we are tackling it.
Okay, just to bring the programme to a close, and we have been discussing parental alienation a lot this week. There are a lot of single fathers in particular, but also single mothers who cannot afford to, a one-bedroom flat, the 200,000 price tag on these.
Yeah.
They are looking for, even if it's a short-term solution of a year or two, somewhere where they can afford to live comfortably and see their children. Can you just tell us what is there for them in a nutshell? What are you doing for them?
Well, I think the affordable homes will go a long way in solving all these problems, because, like I said at the beginning, the Cat 1s will release a lot of housing to us. And therefore, once we get the stock or those houses back into the stock, we can then allocate many more for people who have problems. But look, sometimes people have problems, and they're short-term problems, and and some of them come and say, "Look, I've left my wife, or I've left my husband," and then later on they get together again. Does that mean now that they have 2 houses? It's very, very problematic.
Well,
I'm not saying
temporary,
it's a simple
if
issue.
it's rental, if it's housing for rental, then surely.
Yes,
then...
but does that mean then that I chuck them out after a year because it's a rental? Tell me.
Well, you were talking about them getting back together, so
You
it's
can
not a
always
question
make an
of chucking them
agreement.
out,
I mean,
is
you
it?
can always make an agreement before they move in, you know?
It's really interesting to talk to you, and I really do appreciate you coming back. And I know that, hopefully you will come back at another time and tell us what
Pleasure.
more good work
No problem.
you've been
No
doing.
problem.
Minister Stephen Linares and Action for Housing's Henry Pinna, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, Radio Gibraltar Plus is in Spanish.